If you scroll through modern social media, you will inevitably see fitness influencers promoting something called the Paleo Diet. They proudly hold up plates of fresh, organic, grass-fed steak, perfectly roasted sweet potatoes, and handfuls of fresh wild berries, claiming that this is exactly how our ancient hunter-gatherer ancestors ate. They tell you that returning to this pure, pristine, prehistoric diet is the ultimate secret to human health and longevity. It is a beautiful, highly marketable fantasy. It is also an absolute insult to the horrific, stomach-churning reality of prehistoric survival. The real Ice Age diet was not a curated menu of fresh organic meats and vibrant berries. The real Ice Age diet was a desperate daily game of biological Russian roulette. Our ancestors did not eat for optimal health. They ate to stop their bodies from shutting down. They consumed things that would put a modern human in the emergency room within hours. They ate rotting carcasses, they drank liquefied bone fat, and they consumed highly toxic plants that required complex chemical processing just to become barely edible. Welcome back to our survival series. Today, we are going to completely destroy the romanticized myth of prehistoric eating. We are taking a deep, uncomfortable look at the extreme Ice Age diet, the terrifying reality of prehistoric starvation, and how the human digestive system evolved to process literal poison and putrid decay just to keep our species alive. To understand the prehistoric diet, we first have to completely erase the modern concept of food safety. Today, if meat is left on the kitchen counter for an afternoon, we throw it in the trash out of fear of bacterial infection. For an ancient human, a rotting carcass wasn't a health hazard, it was an absolute miracle. Before humans invented the sophisticated weapons necessary to become undisputed apex predators, like the bow and arrow or the spear thrower, we were opportunistic scavengers. And even after we became expert hunters, the sheer unpredictability of the Ice Age environment meant that starvation was always one bad blizzard away. You could not guarantee a mammoth kill every week. So what did you do when the tribe was starving? You let the other monsters of the Ice Age do the hard work for you. Imagine the terrifying reality of prehistoric scavenging. A pack of massive dire wolves or a saber-toothed cat takes down a wild horse. The human hunters wait in the shadows, watching the predators rip the carcass apart and gorge themselves on the best cuts of meat. Once the apex predators are full and walk away to sleep, the humans desperately rush in. By the time the humans arrive, the meat is not fresh. It has been sitting in the dirt, covered in predator saliva, swarming with flies, and actively beginning to putrefy in the sun. To a modern human stomach, eating this raw, contaminated meat would mean a violent, potentially lethal infection of Salmonella or E. coli. But ancient humans had an evolutionary superpower. Biological studies on human stomach acidity show that the pH level of the human stomach is incredibly low, much lower than most other primates. In fact, our stomach acid is remarkably similar to the stomach acid of carrion-eating scavengers, like vultures and hyenas. This is not a coincidence. This highly acidic stomach was an evolutionary filter, a biological furnace designed to burn away and neutralize the deadly pathogens found in rotting, scavenged meat. We survived because our bodies adapted to digest decay. But what happens when even the rotting meat is gone? When the vultures and the wolves have stripped the carcass completely clean, what is left? Bones. To a modern human, a dry skeleton in the dirt is garbage. To an Ice Age survivalist, a skeleton was a locked treasure chest of the most valuable life-saving substance on the planet, pure, dense animal fat. In the freezing nightmare of the Pleistocene epoch, calories were the only currency that mattered. Lean meat provides protein, but you cannot survive on lean meat alone in extreme cold. If you eat only lean meat without fat, you will develop a horrific condition known as rabbit starvation or protein poisoning. Your liver cannot process that much protein without fat, and you will literally starve to death with a full stomach. Therefore, ancient humans became the ultimate bone breakers. They would take heavy stone hammers and violently smash open the massive femurs and leg bones of scavenged animals to extract the raw, pink bone marrow inside. Marrow is incredibly calorie-dense, essentially pure fat and nutrients. But human ingenuity didn't stop at just cracking bones open. They invented a technological process to extract every single microscopic drop of fat from a skeleton. It was a process called stone boiling. Our ancestors would take a watertight basket woven from roots or a pit lined with animal skin and fill it with water and pulverized crushed bone fragments. Obviously, you cannot put a leather bag directly over a fire without it burning, so they would heat massive river stones in a roaring fire until they were glowing red hot, and then drop the hot stones directly into the water. The water would instantly violently boil. As it boiled, the hidden grease and fat trapped deep inside the cellular structure of the bones would melt and float to the surface. The humans would then carefully skim this thick, gray, greasy film off the top and drink it, or save it to mix with dried meat to create pemmican, the ultimate prehistoric survival ration. They literally boiled rocks to squeeze calories out of dry bones. However, scavenging and bone crushing were only part of the extreme survival diet. What happened when the hunters actually got lucky? What happened when a tribe miraculously managed to kill a 6-ton woolly mammoth? This created a massive logistical nightmare. You suddenly have thousands of pounds of meat, but you have no refrigerators, no freezers, and no salt to cure it. If you leave it out, it will rot or attract every deadly predator within a 50-mile radius. How do you store thousands of pounds of meat for the brutal impending winter? You sink it in a swamp. Archaeologists have discovered that ancient humans utilized the unique chemical properties of peat bogs to create prehistoric refrigerators. A peat bog is an incredibly hostile environment for normal bacteria. The water is cold, it is highly acidic, it is full of antimicrobial compounds from sphagnum moss, and most importantly, it is completely anaerobic, meaning there is zero oxygen. Ancient hunters would butcher a mammoth, wrap the massive chunks of meat in animal hides, and intentionally weigh them down with heavy stones, sinking them deep into the murky, freezing bog water. They would leave the meat there for months, sometimes an entire year. When the freezing winter hit and starvation loomed, they would return to the bog and pull the meat out. But it was no longer fresh meat. The lack of oxygen and the acidic environment caused the meat to undergo a radical chemical transformation. It had fermented. The muscle fibers had broken down into a soft, gray, putrid, cheese-like substance. It smelled like absolute death. For a modern human, taking a bite of this zombie meat would be a death sentence. Anaerobic environments are the perfect breeding ground for Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria that causes botulism, one of the most lethal neurotoxins known to science. A microscopic amount can paralyze your respiratory system and kill you. Yet, our ancestors ate this fermented, rotting bog meat and survived. How? Their gut microbiomes were entirely different from ours. They had spent hundreds of generations constantly exposing their immune systems to extreme pathogens. Their gut flora was a hardened, militarized zone capable of processing fermented decay that would instantly kill a modern city dweller. They ate putrid meat, and it kept them alive until the spring thaw. But meat, whether fresh, scavenged, or fermented, was not always available. During the harshest points of the Ice Age, animal populations would migrate or collapse. When the animals vanished, ancient humans were forced to turn to the surrounding vegetation. And this is where the diet became truly dangerous. Modern fruits and vegetables have been genetically heavily modified through thousands of years of selective agriculture to be sweet, large, and perfectly safe to eat. Wild prehistoric plants, on the other hand, actively do not want to be eaten. Because plants cannot run away from predators, they fight back using complex chemical warfare. They are packed with natural toxins, neurotoxins, and severe digestive irritants. If you are starving in the wild and you just start eating random roots, leaves, and nuts, you will almost certainly poison yourself. So how did our ancestors figure out what was safe to eat? Through a terrifying generational process of trial and error. Imagine the sheer human cost of discovering the prehistoric menu. Someone had to be the first to eat a wild mushroom and die screaming in agony from liver failure so that the rest of the tribe knew to avoid it. Someone had to eat a bitter root and suffer violent convulsions, teaching the next generation to never touch that specific plant. Our knowledge of edible botany is written in the blood of our ancestors who starved, experimented, and died. But ancient humans were incredibly intelligent. They didn't just avoid poisonous plants, they figured out how to biohack them. They learned how to take highly toxic food sources and chemically process them into safe, high-calorie meals. Take the acorn, for example. Oak forests eventually spread across the northern hemisphere, producing millions of tons of acorns. Acorns are incredibly dense in carbohydrates and fats. But if a human eats raw wild acorns, they will become violently ill. Acorns are packed with tannic acid, a bitter, highly toxic chemical defense mechanism that destroys the kidneys and shuts down digestion. To a starving animal, the acorn is useless. To a human brain, it is a puzzle to be solved. Our ancestors figured out that tannins are water-soluble. They invented a complex process called leaching. They would gather thousands of acorns, crush them into a fine paste using heavy grinding stones, and place the paste in woven baskets. They would then place these baskets in a fast-flowing river for days, allowing the continuous flow of fresh water to slowly wash the toxic tannic acid out of the crushed nuts. Once the poison was completely washed away, they were left with a nutrient-dense, starchy flour. They would mix this flour with water and bake it on hot stones to create a dense, highly caloric survival bread. They took a toxic, bitter seed and used fluid dynamics to turn it into the ultimate prehistoric superfood. They did similar things with toxic tubers and roots, learning that boiling them for hours or roasting them in underground fire pits would break down the chemical defenses and make them safe to digest. So, the next time someone tries to sell you the glamorous, clean, and organic paleo diet, remember the brutal, uncompromising reality of human history. Our ancestors did not survive the most hostile climate in human history by eating fresh berries and perfectly cooked steaks. They survived because they were the most stubborn, resilient, and biologically adaptable creatures to ever walk the earth. They drank the grease from pulverized bones. They scavenged the scraps of sabertooth cats. They ate fermented, putrid meat pulled from the bottom of freezing swamps. And they gambled their lives eating toxic roots until they mastered the chemistry required to neutralize the poison. You do not have a fragile stomach. You are the genetic descendant of absolute survivors who possessed cast-iron digestive systems and an unbreakable will to live. You are here today because, when faced with starvation, your ancestors looked at a rotting carcass and a poisonous plant and decided that they were not going to die today. If this deep dive into the terrifying reality of the extreme prehistoric diet changed the way you look at food and human survival, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below what aspect of prehistoric life we should expose next. Stay safe, be thankful for your modern refrigerator, and I will see you in the next one.